So, to follow that trail, I reached out to current Kennett Police Chief Kenny Wilson. You heard from Wilson in Chapter 3 of this podcast. He was a Kennett patrol officer back in 1999 and remembered when Robert Brashears committed suicide at the Super 8 motel. That night, Kennett officers collected 2 guns from Brashears, an AMT backup model 380 and a 9mm Luger. And there's been a lot of speculation about what happened to those guns. Do you have any idea what happened to those guns?
At this point, no, we don't. They were collected, according to the report that I did read. It was collected at the scene. The chief at that time, if I remember correctly, took them into possession and supposed to be held for evidence. And that was the last that I could find documentation-wise as to what happened to those weapons.
The guns are not in Kennett's evidence room, and there is no record of them being destroyed. In Missouri, law enforcement agencies must obtain a court order to destroy firearms held as evidence. Have you been able to find any documentation that would show they were physically destroyed, a court order or anything like that?
No, can't find anything like that at all. There's no documentation there.
And there's a possible reason for that. Back in the early to mid-2010s, Wilson told me the Kennett police chief at the time opted to destroy old paper records being kept in storage. That could be why there's no documentation if those guns were destroyed. The department's original copy of Robert Brashears' suicide report is also gone. According to a duplicate copy I have of the report, the .380 shell casing collected at the motel was placed in a plastic bag and filed with that original paperwork. Have you looked for the 1999 incident report on Brashears' suicide just by chance to see if you still have it there?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've had guys go through that storage, and I believe the oldest report they can find dates back to 2007. So it's very difficult now.
So if that shell casing was attached to that original report, then it's gone just like the report itself, huh?
I'm going to assume so, yes, ma'am.
Without the actual gun or that shell casing, there is no way to prove with 100% certainty that Robert Brashears used the same gun at the yogurt shop in Lexington and to kill himself. And if other possible cases come to light where a .380 was used, investigators won't have Brashears' .380 to test against. How many different agencies or entities have reached out to you and asked you about the gun?
There's been several. Golly, it seems like just all over the country. Texas, Kentucky, Tennessee, obviously here in Missouri, there's the ones that you mentioned earlier. Been several agencies interested in getting the ballistics from these guns.
As a veteran law enforcement officer, is it frustrating to you that you can't just say, here you go, here they are?
Oh, it'd be great if we could do that and help out and help connect some of the dots here that need to be connected. It'd be a crucial piece of evidence for these homicides and for the investigation.
It is also possible that, rather than being lost or destroyed without the paperwork proof, someone took those guns. Not only were they connected to the suicide of a career criminal, but also missing from evidence $2,600 in cash seized from Brashears' motel room. I asked Chief Wilson if it is possible a former Kennett officer or their family member has one or both guns.
It maybe, it's hard to say. I would have had nothing to do with the chief's office at that time. I don't want to speculate too much and start pointing fingers at somebody doing something that wasn't proper at the time, but it could be a possibility, and I just don't know.
Would it help if maybe anybody, family members, just looked,
amongst
a
family member would say, hey, I do remember this, and for some reason may have still had that weapon, that'd be great.
Members of the Scheer investigative team remembered their frustration in learning Kennett PD could not find either of the guns taken into evidence after Brashear's 1999 suicide. Here's retired Highway Patrol Captain Phil Gregory.
I do know after the DNA match, we sent investigators down to see if they had those guns, and obviously they did not.
In your professional opinion, when there's a suicide case, what are the chances that somebody in law enforcement takes a gun home? Does that happen?
Those things happen on occasion. I mean, a big piece of what the patrol's criminal investigative units did were public corruption crimes. So we've certainly seen those things. I mean, can I say that definitively happened here? No. Would a gun from a suicide be kept forever? Probably not. A lot of different things could be going on. It could be what you mentioned. Someone could have taken the gun. Could be sloppy paperwork as far as the disposition of the gun. There's no telling at this point, given the amount of time that's elapsed.
And obviously nobody at that time knew, but it's got to be frustrating that it's...
It is frustrating, and you know, the thing I would say about that is if someone had a gun that they thought might be the gun from evidence in Kennett, then certainly that would be useful information, and it's not to get anybody in trouble for taking the gun. More so, that could be a key to connect Brashears to more homicides or assaults.
That's exactly why it's wanted.
Absolutely.
And that's why the effort continues.
Incredibly important.
To find it. Current Highway Patrol Master Sergeant Chris Hamlet has been part of the renewed effort to try and find Brashear's AMT backup model .380 pistol. But no one seems to know what happened to it.
Your guess is as good as mine. That's something we've talked to Chief Wilson about, and he's been extremely helpful. Everyone down there has been extremely helpful in us trying to locate that gun. We ran into an issue with the missing gun in Arkansas as well.
Sergeant Hamlet is talking about the second missing gun connected to Robert Brashears. And investigators in both Missouri and Texas believe it could be the .22 caliber revolver he used to kill Sherry and Megan Shear in 1998. Just 2 weeks after that horrific crime, police in Paragould, Arkansas, found a loaded .22 behind the tire of a woman's car after arresting Brashears for attempting to break into her house. When I interviewed Brashears' daughter, Deborah, she recalled a story involving that .22. She told me her father tried in vain to have his family find that gun before Paragould police did.
He left the gun there, and he asked my mother to call my mother from the jail and asked her to go get it. The police heard it, and they went back and got the gun. They have pictures of my mother and my grandfather showing up to go get the gun. Bud Cooper told me that.
But they didn't get that gun.
No, the police got that gun.
Paragould police arrested Robert Brashears on April 12, 1998. Information contained in the Shear case file shows Paragould ran a search of Brashears' .22 through the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, twice on April 14th. Master Sergeant Hamlet told me Paragould police cannot locate the gun now and cannot find any records that show it was destroyed. Sound familiar? And remember, Brashears' second gun at the yogurt shop was also a .22. I asked Austin Detective Dan Jackson if it was possible the .22 lost by Paragould PD is also the second yogurt shop murder weapon. Jackson said it could be, but there's just no way to ever know.
I just kept digging and found a Greenville, South Carolina address that was 0.7 miles from Genevieve's apartment, the crime scene. I thought that can't be a coincidence.
Remember when genetic genealogist C.C. Moore told us how close Robert Brashears lived to his first known murder victim? Brashears can count himself lucky he did not turn up on the initial suspect list in Genevieve Zatricki's murder. Brashears was a convicted felon living near the crime scene in the spring of 1990. And I learned from former New Madrid County Deputy Chris Hensley he worked near the scene as well.
I believe we learned that he was a maintenance guy at an apartment that was near Genevieve Zatricki's apartment complex, and nobody remembers him. Nobody worked with him. Nobody that was a resident at the time that he was there, brought up that he was weird to them.
And there was a second chance to identify Robert Brashears as a potential suspect in the Zatricki case. In 2006, you'll recall Jenny's murder was linked through DNA to the Missouri murders of Sherry and Megan Shear. Investigators from South Carolina joined forces with the Shear team and used a geographic mapping system to search for people who lived near both crime scenes. Robert Brashears not only lived in Greenville in 1990, he lived just 60 miles from Portageville in 1998 when the Shears were killed. Here's what lead investigator Bud Cooper told me about that list of more than 300 names shortly after they started working through it.
We've had some good leads, some leads that look promising. But of those, the promising leads that we've had thus far, we've been able to eliminate through DNA samples.
So up and down again.
Up and down.
Do you think that your killer is on that list?
I don't know. That's a tough call. I hope so.
But it would turn out Robert Brashears' name did not appear on the list of 300 or on any list compiled during the 20-year Shear investigation. And records show he was never a suspect in South Carolina or in Memphis or Lexington or Austin, Texas. Here's retired Highway Patrol Captain Phil Gregory.
That was one of the first things when we got the DNA hit through genealogy DNA. Went back to that and looked, was our guy in there? Nope.
If you believe Robert Brashears was lucky enough to avoid being arrested or caught at a crime scene or named as a suspect in any of his murders, then you know exactly when his luck ran out. In his final hours, alone in that Kennett, Missouri motel room, there wasn't a fake ID or an elaborate lie or even his father who could save him.
You got to wonder what went through his mind in that hotel room in Kennett. Did he think that's it? That's why they're there?
Well, it doesn't make any sense to end your life over a stolen license plate.
Does not.
But knowing how Robert Brashears' life ended does not make up for all the lucky breaks he seemed to get leading up to that day, or the mistakes made that kept him from being identified any sooner. Here's Highway Patrol Master Sergeant Chris Hamlet.
Yeah, it is frustrating. But I will say, I try to put myself in the shoes of all the officers that dealt with him in some manner, or I only know how we do things present day. So it is easy for me in hindsight to Monday morning quarterback. That being said, I think there is an issue with things sitting on shelves and not being tested. There's a multitude of issues that go into that go much higher than law enforcement. And I think it's incumbent upon everyone to understand the ramifications of things not being tested. The missing gun and things like that, all I can say is it's a huge frustration.
It's also frustrating for investigators to try to make sense of Brashears' trail of destruction across the country.
that's what's crazy, because you look at the map, and I had a whole map in our office with pins, where he had been. And, most of it was sort of confined to that, from Florida on up, right, to the eastern border. And then you had then you have Kentucky, and you've got Tennessee a little bit, out there. And then we know he was in Texas.
And when they dig into where he lived, worked, and hunted for his victims, a picture emerges of a man lost to everyone, including himself. That's next on Chasing a Ghost, Chapter 10, No Set Path.